The elders had spoken those words for so long that even the youngest species in the galaxy knew them by heart. They were not a law, not even a decree, but something older and heavier, like gravity, unchanging and unquestionable. Do not provoke the humans. The phrase had crossed empires, endured the fall of civilizations, and was whispered in war rooms where maps glowed red with enemy borders. No one living had seen the full measure of what it meant. No one wanted to. The archives kept only fragments. Some had been deliberately erased, others had been lost when entire star systems burned. What remained were not records so much as scars, military manifests with every vessel marked destroyed, planetary census rolls abruptly ending in a date, calm logs filled with silence after a last, panicked transmission. Scholars pieced together patterns, tried to reconstruct events, and always ended in the same place. The warnings were real. The proof was gone, but the fear endured. Among the elder species, the consensus was absolute. The humans were different. They were not the largest, nor the fastest, nor the most advanced. Yet they carried a capacity for persistence that could not be measured in fleets or technology. They fought in ways that ignored the boundaries other species considered natural. To them, loss was fuel, pain was instruction, and surrender was a word they applied only to others. The Threx Dominion heard these stories as children might hear old ghost tales, entertaining, but irrelevant to the modern age. The Dominion was young by galactic standards, aggressive by nature, and drunk on recent conquests. They believed their fleets were unmatched, their technology peerless. The humans had kept to themselves for decades, avoiding entanglements. To the Threx, that quiet was weakness. It was the posture of a prey species that had learned its place. Their leader, arch-strategist Veth Karen, had built her career on dismantling the reputations of so-called dangerous adversaries. She considered the human mystique nothing more than political theater sustained by cowardly elders who clung to the myths of a bygone age. Karen saw an opportunity, not just to expand the Dominion's territory, but to shatter one of the galaxy's oldest superstitions. If she could subdue a human colony and display it as proof of Dominion dominance, she would etch her name in history. Her advisors voiced token cautions, citing the scattered archive records and the inscrutable human psychology. She dismissed them with the confidence of a predator certain of its kill. The human frontier was lightly defended. Intelligence reports confirmed that the nearest military fleet was months away. The target was a mining colony orbiting a small, aging red star, no strategic value to the humans beyond its mineral output. A swift show of force would bring it under control without prolonged resistance. In the capital halls of the Dominion, her plan was celebrated. The Elder's warning was a relic, they said, a story told to frighten fledgling species into submission. Soon, the galaxy would see the truth. The fleet launched in perfect formation, hulls gleaming with the Dominion's crimson insignia. Kirin traveled with them, eager to stand on the command deck as human resistance crumbled. In her mind, she imagined the surrender transmissions, the bowed heads, the captured assets paraded before her. The elders would have no choice but to acknowledge the Dominion's supremacy. Far away, in the dark corridors of the Elder Council's archives, a lone historian reviewed a copy of the Dominion's mobilization order. His spines quivered, a reaction he had not felt in centuries. He knew that the warnings had been issued not for diplomacy, but for survival. His ancestors had watched what happened when humanity was crossed, and it had taken centuries for their own species to recover from the echoes. He closed the file and whispered a phrase in his native tongue that translated, roughly, to "They will not stop now." But in the bright war halls of the Threx Dominion, no one was listening. The human mining colony of Durnal Station orbited in slow silence around its aging red star, its linked modules and cargo platforms drifting like beads on a loose string. Life there moved to the rhythm of shipments and ore extraction, the work steady and uneventful. That routine fractured the moment an unfamiliar fleet appeared at the edge of the system, dark silhouettes flaring into sensor range without warning. Their arrival carried no subtlety, no effort at negotiation. A single transmission cut through all channels, formal surrender terms spoken in the clipped, ceremonial cadence of the Threx Dominion. The message offered no preamble, only the assertion that the colony now belonged to the Dominion. Compliance, it said, would preserve life and property. Defiance would not be tolerated. The Threx commanders had sent such declarations to countless worlds, confident in the inevitable submission that followed. They expected the same here. The humans of Durnal Station did not respond in the way the Threx anticipated. The first reply was a request for clarification, voiced with the steady calm of a freight controller confirming a docking manifest. That same voice transmitted again minutes later, citing protocol and asking for additional time to consult with higher authorities. None of it was accidental. Behind the polite tone, every second bought time for hidden evacuation protocols to engage, for encrypted distress signals to pierce the jamming nets the Threx had begun to deploy. The Dominion commanders mistook this for hesitation. Their analysts, watching from orbit, saw no defensive mobilization, only routine cargo transfers, shuttle traffic, and station lights winking as if nothing had changed. They believed the humans were in shock, slow to grasp the new reality. To demonstrate authority, the Dominion's flagship issued a warning shot, targeting a derelict asteroid near the station. When the humans still failed to capitulate, the next shot was not a warning. Without announcement, a focused energy barrage struck Habitat 6, one of the older civilian modules. The structure ruptured instantly, spilling a spray of glowing debris into the darkness. Hundreds of workers and their families were lost in that first strike, the atmosphere venting before emergency seals could engage. For the Threx, this was a precise application of force, meant to sever resistance before it could take root. The humans received it differently. The delay in their communications ended. No further questions were sent to the Threx fleet. Within the station's internal channels, however, orders moved with sudden clarity. Surviving modules began rerouting power to secure systems. Docked cargo haulers were stripped of excess mass and reconfigured for rapid acceleration. The colony's automated processing plant shifted output from ore refinement to the assembly of makeshift shielding. Every decision now revolved around one fact: their people had been killed. A final narrowband transmission escaped before the Threx jammers fully locked down the system. It was not sent to the Dominion fleet. It carried no demands, no pleas, only a brief burst of text relayed to human space. 3 words: they've killed our people. It traveled through the relay network at light speed, received by stations and ships far beyond the reach of the Threx fleet's sensors. It required no elaboration. On the Threx flagship, commanders debated whether to destroy another module to hasten compliance. Their leader dismissed the idea as unnecessary. In her mind, the point had been made. Resistance would collapse soon, as it had for every other species subjected to such measures. The destruction of a single habitat was, to them, a calculated reminder of the price of defiance. They did not see the pattern the elders had spoken of. They did not know that in human history, the line between negotiation and war was not measured by territory or resources, but by the taking of lives. And they did not understand that once crossed, that line could never be uncrossed. The message from Durnal Station reached the Human Alliance command net within hours, its brevity amplifying its weight. There was no ambiguity in its meaning, no need for intelligence analysts to interpret intent. Civilian blood had been spilled, and the chain of response was already set in motion. Across core and frontier systems alike, orders moved at a pace that disregarded bureaucracy. Civil fleets were redirected to evacuation corridors, orbital yards halted commercial contracts, and planetary assemblies approved emergency war measures with near unanimity. The debates that normally consumed weeks ended in minutes. Military command consolidated under a single strategic authority, dissolving regional rivalries that had lingered for decades. Veteran admirals and fleet tacticians, some long retired, returned to service without hesitation. The Logistics Corps began the vast work of drawing from reserve stockpiles, shipping munitions and fuel to forward depots, and converting civilian transports into armed support craft. The Alliance's manufacturing world shifted without ceremony from consumer goods to weapons production, old ship designs reactivated from archives, their blueprints distributed to any yard with the capacity to build. On the information front, the event was neither exaggerated nor softened. The images from Habitat 6 were transmitted to every human colony and station, the silent wreckage drifting under the pale light of its dying star. This was not propaganda, it was evidence. The effect was immediate. Volunteers poured into recruitment centers, not out of coercion, but from an understanding shared across their species: the dead must be answered for. Skilled workers, engineers, and pilots who could not fight directly found ways to contribute, offering designs, technical expertise, and industrial capacity. From the Dominion's perspective, the mobilization seemed clumsy and desperate. Their observers misread the visible activity as a frantic attempt to salvage defenses before an inevitable defeat. They saw ships leaving ports at irregular intervals, outdated models being recommissioned, unarmed freighters moving in convoys. To the Threx, whose wars were fought as structured campaigns with clear timetables, this looked like disorganization. What they did not grasp was that these movements were calculated to appear scattered while masking the true deployment pattern of the Alliance's forces. The first sign of human intent came not in open space, but in the disappearance of a Dominion scout vessel assigned to monitor the shipyards of Lagrange Node 4. Its last transmission was a routine report of no unusual activity. Hours later, its signal vanished. The Dominion assumed a mechanical failure or navigational mishap. The truth was simpler and far more deliberate. The ship had been taken intact. Inside the Alliance's War Council, the decision was unanimous: the response would not be defensive. Containment was not an option. The strike would be deep, fast, and aimed not at the Dominion's frontier holdings, but at its ability to wage war at all. The objective was to end the conflict before the Threx could adapt, before they understood the full weight of what they had provoked. Every operation was planned for precision. Civilian population centers would be bypassed, but military production, logistics hubs, and command structures would be targeted without hesitation. Within weeks, the first combat groups slipped beyond the mapped lanes, vanishing into the cold expanse. No public declaration of war was issued, no demands were sent. The Alliance understood that words were useless now. The Dominion had set the terms with their opening strike. Humanity would answer in action alone. The preparations did not inspire celebration. There were no grand parades, no triumphant speeches. The atmosphere was measured, almost solemn, as if the entire species was tightening its focus to a single, unyielding point. Those who remembered the old warnings understood what this meant. The machinery had started moving, and once set in motion, it would not stop until the work was finished. The Dominion capital system pulsed with the unhurried rhythm of peacetime. Merchant convoys threaded through orderly lanes, orbital shipyards worked to fulfill long-term contracts, and the military command center maintained its usual rotation of patrol assignments. No one expected an attack, least of all here, at the heart of their territory. When it came, it arrived without prelude. A gravity well spike registered for less than a second before the sensors drowned in false data. By the time the Dominion's defensive grid recalibrated, human warships were already in system, emerging from a jump trajectory thought to be impossible at such proximity to a star. They did not announce themselves. There were no hails, no ultimatums, only movement, fast and precise. The first targets were not population centers but the nodes that allowed the Dominion to coordinate defense, deep space relays, orbital command stations, and fleet control arrays. Within minutes, communication between the capital's defense sectors was fragmented, commanders operating blind and unaware of the scale of the intrusion. Human strike groups moved in synchrony, their actions calculated to fracture the Dominion's ability to respond before a coherent counterattack could form. Dominion war doctrine emphasized decisive engagements, overwhelming force concentrated at a single point. The humans exploited this, attacking from multiple vectors at once, never allowing defenders to mask their strength. Shipyards were disabled with surgical precision, dry ducts split apart by kinetic impacts, munitions depots ignited and contained detonations that spared nearby civilian areas yet rendered entire fleets inert. Inside the Dominion's high command, disbelief outweighed fear. How had the humans reached this deep without detection? How could an enemy, technologically inferior by their estimation, operate at such speed and accuracy? Reports came in disjointed and contradictory: capital ships destroyed before launching, defense platforms falling silent without visible damage, patrol wings vanishing from sensors mid-transit. Every attempt to regroup was answered by another strike, as if the humans anticipated each move before it began. The human fleet did not linger at any single target. Once an objective was neutralized, the ships vanished into the system's shadows, reappearing without pattern at the next point of vulnerability. Dominion escorts sent in pursuit often failed to find them; those that did rarely returned. It was not a campaign of destruction for its own sake. Every action served the singular goal of dismantling the Dominion's ability to continue the war. Civilian traffic was left untouched. The message in that restraint was as deliberate as the strikes themselves. This was not conquest. It was a warning, carried in the wreckage of every military asset now drifting in silence. When the Dominion's orbital headquarters finally received a direct transmission from the human fleet, it consisted of a single statement: "The war ends when you speak the words. Until then, there will be no sanctuary." No threats accompanied it, only certainty. The channel closed before a reply could be formed. For the first time in generations, the Dominion's leadership faced a reality they could not shape through intimidation or force. Entire sectors were cut off, their fleets unable to resupply or receive orders. Defensive plans that had stood unchallenged for decades collapsed within hours under a style of warfare they had never prepared for. By the second day, the human fleet was gone from the capital system, slipping away as suddenly as it had arrived. They left behind no occupation, no formal claim, only the lingering shock of vulnerability, and the knowledge that the next appearance could be anywhere, at any time, with the same cold precision. The Dominion had sought to make an example of humanity. Instead, humanity had made an example of them. The shock of the capital strike rippled outward faster than official reports could contain it. Dominion fleets positioned along the frontier found themselves without orders, their supply lines severed and their homeworld's authority in question. Local commanders began making independent decisions, some retreating to fortified positions, others abandoning posts entirely. The cohesion that had defined the Dominion's recent expansion dissolved in days. In peripheral systems, governors weighing loyalty against survival opened covert channels to the human alliance, offering to withdraw forces or cede territory in exchange for guarantees of safety. Others, fearing retaliation, simply declared neutrality and cut communication with the capital. The Dominion's control fractured not from conquest, but from the realization that it could no longer protect its own holdings. The human fleet did not rush to exploit these openings. Instead, they maintained a deliberate pace, striking only when necessary to dismantle remaining military infrastructure capable of sustaining the war. Shipyards in outlying sectors were rendered unusable, long-range missile silos deactivated, and orbital weapons grids stripped of power. In each case, the precision of these operations reinforced a singular truth: humanity was not interested in occupation. They were ensuring the Dominion could not continue hostilities, and they were doing it with an efficiency that left no room for misinterpretation. The surrender, when it came, was not the product of a grand negotiation. It was transmitted as a simple, formal acknowledgement from the Dominion's interim leadership that all military actions against the human alliance would cease immediately. No conditions were requested. None were offered. The war, in its official sense, ended with less ceremony than it had begun. In the weeks that followed, humanitarian convoys were dispatched to border territories where supply routes had collapsed. The alliance offered aid without commentary, repairing essential systems and delivering resources before withdrawing. There were no demands for tribute, no annexations, no territorial claims. The message this left behind was more enduring than any territorial victory. The humans had acted not for expansion, but for finality. Among the elder civilizations, the event was dissected with clinical attention. The warnings that had survived in fragments through the ages were now given fresh testimony. New records were added to the archives, clear, verifiable accounts of a conflict that had moved from provocation to resolution in a span too short for traditional diplomacy to intervene. The Council of Elders issued an updated advisory to all recognized polities, not as law, but as a matter of survival, never provoke the humans. In Dominion space, the memory of the war reshaped governance. The new leadership abandoned expansionist policies, diverting resources inward to rebuild and secure what remained. While they never openly admitted fear, their military doctrine shifted from aggression to defense, their fleets no longer venturing beyond established borders. In private, the officers who had survived the capital strike spoke of the experience not as defeat in battle, but as an encounter with a force that fought without pause until its purpose was fulfilled. For humanity, the war left no celebrations. Ships returned to dock in silence, their crews dispersing without fanfare. Factories reverted to civilian production, fleets demobilized, and those who had commanded the operations offered no public statements. The sense across human space was not triumph, but completion. The threat had been answered, and that was enough. Generations later, the records of the conflict would be retold alongside the older warnings, not as myth, but as history. In council chambers, in training academies, and in the hushed conversations of those who studied war, the same conclusion would be drawn. Humanity's patience was vast, but once broken, it moved with purpose that could not be bargained with, distracted, or delayed. And when its purpose was done, it simply stopped, leaving the galaxy to remember why the warnings had been spoken in the first place.